Hello, everyone. This is part 3 of Space Relations Continued. Section 11. Then the slaves were marched to another building, unshackled, and herded into a bare, lofty chamber lined with gray ceramic. High up on one wall was a railed balcony. The old queen appeared on this, followed by several slavers. Another figure joined them, a small, brightly colored man in a long mauve robe and pea-green turban. Then a slim, fair young woman in a gray military jacket and jud purse, and next to her a shiny, hugely obese man in a white suit. Then a group of men, mostly in various uniforms reminiscent of off-Earth police forces and armies. The queen produced his optical device and nodded. A slaver stepped to the rail and bellowed, "Strip down!" A few men and one or two women began timidly to undress. "Hurry it up!" More obeyed, and most stood gaping and undecided. The slaver in command turned, and two other slavers pulled hoses up the rail. Water burst from the nozzles, and the slavers played it at random on the men and women below. It was scalding. There were screams. The slaves threw off their garments and dropped them on the sloshing floor. The streams of water ceased. "Kick the clothes over to the door." The naked slaves obeyed. Craig, kicking soggy, odorous garments and shoes along the floor with the others, hit his toe painfully against a small, hard object in a pocket. He tried to dislodge it by kicking. It would not come free. He hooked the trousers on one foot and shook, awkwardly, hopping on the other. The object was caught in wet, stubborn cloth. Then it slid out onto the floor. It was a little metal-bladed pocket knife. Craig covered it with his bare left foot and managed by shuffling to slide it along while kicking clothing with his right foot. The door opened. Technicians removed the clothing in refuse bins. Craig shuffled away toward the wall below the balcony. Here the spectators would have to lean over the rail to observe him. For several minutes, the slavers played hot but tolerable water, evidently with disinfectants and emulsifiers in it, on the naked men and women. Craig noticed that the slaves avoided looking at one another's bodies. It was the only help they could give one another. In the steam, he bent over and picked up the knife. The water ceased. "Step over to the walls. Raise your arms." Rows of holes at knee height, waist height, and shoulder height emitted hot, parching air. The slaves were dried for 3 or 4 minutes. The balcony was empty, save for one slaver leaning on a laser carbine and picking his nose. The door opened. A slaver leaned in and called, "S-13, Plato Zenitus." A man walked to the door, his feet slapping a hesitating rhythm on the ceramic floor. "E4, Billy Henderson." A boy, hardly past puberty. "A6, Mavis Peace." A scrawny young girl. "A31, Ismail Makala." They were being called out by polls. After each 10, the doors would close for a quarter of an hour or so, then open for the summoning of the next lot. "B10, Jane Doe." It was the raw-boned, old marching woman from Craig's poll. She passed Craig, grinned, and growled, "I feel simply naked without my tiara. Keep smiling, young fellow me lad." "M8, Pierre Khalidi." Then, "E9, John Smith." Craig padded toward the door. He had the little knife in his left hand, which he held half open and let hang at his side. There was small hope of his being able to keep it, and great danger in trying to. But it was a recourse. It was something. Along one side of a corridor ran a row of crude wooden platforms, about 1 meter square and half a meter high. B10 was standing alone on one, M8 on another. Next to each platform was an armed slaver, and around each was a knot of Cassarians. Most of these were the miscellaneous military and police types, but some were more colorful. Craig saw the turbaned man and the fat man in the white suit examining B10, and the handsome young woman in jud purse scanning M8. A slaver seized Craig by his elbows from behind and pushed him onto a platform, where he stood passively, his back to the little group that was forming, his guilty left hand slightly in front of him. "Turn around," snapped the slaver guarding his platform. Craig turned, and hooked his hands together behind him, so that if need be he could shift the knife easily. He was aware that this put him in a somewhat flaunting posture, and he slouched as much as he could. A slaver slightly cleaner than the others, and accompanied obsequiously by the ex-obstetrician and the ex-librarian, had appeared and taken up a position near B10. The auction started. Tehran female, 63. Highly educated. Bidding starts at 200 credits. Do I hear 200? I have 200. Do I have 210? 210? Going once at 200. I have 210. Do I have 225? I have 215. 215. Do I have 225? Thank you. I have 225. Do I hear 250? Highly educated. 250. Going once at 225. Going twice. I have 250. The old woman was sold for 310 credits. The successful bidder was the man in the green turban, whom the others addressed respectfully as Sir Osman. M8 went for 765 to a tight-faced brown man in a mixture of the uniforms of the Serious Confederation Police and the Tehran Marines. But during the bidding, the fat man in white and the young blonde woman, evidently his employer, showed interest for a time, and as the bids climbed, Craig could hear the man say in a mezzo-soprano voice to the woman, "Too expensive for the mines, my lady. Have you anything else in mind?" "Nothing?" "So." The group came to Craig. Several of the half-uniformed men peered at him. One reached for his left arm. The knife went into his right hand smoothly enough, and thumbed the muscles, shaking his head. The fat man looked interrogatively at the blonde female. She moved in and scanned him, looking momentarily at his pudenda. The fat man reached out a small, plump white hand and jabbed his fingertips into the side of Craig's scrotum, saying, "Cough." Craig coughed and gagged. The other side. Again, Craig coughed. The man reached for Craig's right hand. There was barely time to shift the knife, and examined the writer's callus on the side of the middle finger. The man and the woman consulted by a glance. The woman shrugged. "Tehran male, about 30, said the auctioneer. "Highly educated. Bidding starts at 250. Do I hear 250? 250. I'll take 200. Do I hear 200? I have 200. This was Sir Osman. Do I have 210? I hear 205. This was the man in uniform. Do I have 210? Going once at 205. I have 210. This was the fat man. Do I have 210? 220. Going once at 210. Going twice at 210. Sold at 210. So it was to be the mines. Craig felt himself pulled off the platform. Someone threw some gray, scratchy clothing at him. He put it on. Shapeless trousers and a drawstring waist. A loose pullover shirt. There were pockets in the trousers. Craig slid the knife into one of them. A penknife in the mines. Attention, everyone. A man with a penknife is known to be at large in this mine. Unarmed men with pickaxes and jackhammers are warned not to stray too far from the guards. The brave old woman had said, "Keep smiling, young fellow, me lad." She had brought 100 credits more than he had. There was a stir. Nearby, the auctioning of a Tehran male, 35, experienced in personal combat, had begun routinely. But back at Craig's platform, some sort of functionary in a black uniform was in vigorous but impassive conversation with a white-suited fatty. "I'm sorry, Dr. Corey," the functionary was saying. "Mr. Pursuvan understands that the slave is now yours entirely. He only asks at this time whether you would permit him to interview the slave." Dr. Corey asked, in his unchanged voice, "What for? Is he going to make Lady Morgan an offer for this specimen?" "I think we are talking too loud," whispered the functionary, with a pained look around. Dr. Corey's boyish mezzo-soprano and undiminished. "If this is in line with his usual interests, he is quite mistaken. Quite. I'm surprised. This is inert." The functionary persisted. "It can scarcely take more than a minute or two." "Very well. If he will confine himself to verbal questioning this time, I have no guard to spare." "Thank you. I will borrow a guard from Captain Van Dam. We shall be no more than 5 minutes." Dr. Corey looked skeptical. The functionary disappeared for a moment into the press around the auction, emerged with the hulking Bastigliano, collected Craig, and led the way out of the building, across the dusty compound baking in midday radiation, and into the shed where the flogging had taken place. They went to the office at the end. Bastigliano took a position outside. The functionary knocked, opened the door, said, "Here's what you wanted, sir." pushed Craig in, and, remaining outside, slammed the door violently. The old queen stood up behind his desk. He looked around, Craig following his glance, at the dove-gray silks, the lilac velvet, the slate-blue leather. "You will not change your mind?" he asked in his bassoon voice. Craig returned his gaze steadily. "I will not." The light eyes hardened. Mr. Pursuivant floated to the door and opened it. "Return this. It prefers the mines of Tragast." And that will be it for this episode of our little audiobook regarding space relations by Donald Barr. These sections do seem to be getting a lot longer, so I will be sure to section them out appropriately so they're no more than about 20 minutes. I hope you have a nice day, take care, and see you next time. This is Ranting Politics.